Hello, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Football. My name is John Halpin alongside Chris Palma. Chris Palma, how you doing, my brother?
Doing good, man. Another year in the books. Super Bowl is a wrap. What a season.
Absolutely. It's been a crazy year in the NFL. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs for winning the Super Bowl 58. It was a great game to watch, a very wonderful spectacle of a performance by both teams, Usher and Post Malone, everyone. It was a great viewing and a great day in America for football. Um, but before we get into any of that, we do want to talk about what transpired at the Super Bowl Day parade yesterday in Kansas City. Now we're recording this the Thursday after the Super Bowl. We're recording this on the 15th, and the Super Bowl party fell on Wednesday, Valentine's Day, on the 14th. Um, and there was a shooting that happened during at the parade. According to reports at the moment, um, one woman died, 20 are injured and at local hospitals. Three suspects have been apprehended by citizens and police, but at this current point in time, no charges have been filed on the suspects. That will soon change as time goes on. But Chris Palmer, let me just get your brief thoughts on this, my brother.
It just stupid people do stupid things and make good things terrible. You know, I understand a lot of people did not want the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. This is not a way. This is not something you do. You know, the city of Kansas City was going just having a good time trying to enjoy themselves, and these three morons just decided to come in and cause havoc and create chaos and become infamous overnight. Um, Hats off to the civilians who helped apprehend the three gunmen so they couldn't get away. Deepest condolences to the one unfortunate fatality and the 20 injured who are still suffering and recovering from their injuries. This is just too much. It just shouldn't have happened. It's totally avoidable. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to start by giving my condolences to the one woman. I believe her name was Lisa, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know her last name at the moment. And the 20 that are injured, just so unfortunate, man. And I hope you guys can recover. I hope that the three people who do that did this do face justice in a timely manner, so that the victims on all of this can get their deserved closure. But they'll never have closure. This is just an event that was meant to be a very joyous occasion for the city of Kansas City, and it turned into a nightmare very quick. And my thoughts on it is this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening in America, but this is as American as it gets. Is gun violence on in a crowd where people are just bound to get hurt. And it's so unfortunate that this happens on a daily basis. On a daily basis, this happens, and it's just disheartening. I'm sad. I'm angry, and it's. I hope that we can be a better country going forward, but seeing how things have been in the last couple years, with shootings happening everywhere you turn, my cynicism is at an all-time high.
Yeah, no, it's just a very unfortunate situation. Again, it was totally avoidable. There's no reason to bring a firearm into such a big crowd of people, especially if you have the intention to do something evil. Like you, it's such a loaded conversation as to what should be done, what could be done, this, that, the third. It's just, and that's one of the biggest dividing conversations, unfortunately, in this nation on what can be done to prevent it. The ending result is usually it's not preventable. It's just there's got to be solutions. You're always going to have shitty people who do shitty things, and unfortunately, those shitty people are going to have the same ability to obtain a tool that can be lethal. And
Yeah.
that's just the end result always.
Yeah. And I think the time for blame is over because we can blame everyone we want under the sun. The time for solutions is now. And I hope that we as a nation, we do find those solutions sooner than later.
100%, I agree.
So, with that being said, our hearts go out to the city of Kansas City. Um, and we want to continue on with our podcast because this is going to be our last weekly episode. We're going to do a couple episodes throughout the off season. So we wanted to end this off as give you our thoughts on what happened. But we did want to briefly touch on the shooting that happened at the parade. But now let's do what we do best and let's talk about the game itself.
Right.
And don't worry, timestamps are going to be below as well. So the game itself was a very interesting game, to say the least. It was a tale of two halves. The first half was a very defensive game, very low scoring, 10-3. San Francisco led at halftime, but then third quarter, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they kicked it up a notch. They just kind of kept going. Another field goal, a touchdown, 13-3. Couple more field goals exchanged throughout, and then before you know it, it's in overtime. And this is the second Super Bowl ever that has went to overtime. And this was the first one. This is the first overtime game since they changed the rules, where both teams will get a possession at even if the other team scores a touchdown. Now, before that, if a team scored a touchdown in overtime, game was over, right? But now it's like even if they scored the touchdown, the other team still gets a chance. And that makes the game very different. So it's 19-19 at half. The Chiefs want San
19-19
Francisco
at the end of regulation.
Yeah, sorry. 19-19 at the end of regulation. The Chiefs want to kick the ball to San Francisco because their mindset is we want whatever you're going to do, we're going to match you. We're going to match it, right? Or exceed it. And so San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan, elected to receive the ball. And I think that stunned Kansas City. They're like, oh, wow, they want the ball. They can have the ball. Because the 49ers went down the field. They got a field goal. Patrick Mahomes was like, you're not getting the ball back. Touchdown, game over, Chiefs win, the dynasty is here. So, but Chris Palmer, let me get your thoughts on this. Should the Niners have elected to kick in overtime?
Well, before we go into overtime, let's back it up a little bit.
Okay.
Let's back it up and break down this game a little bit. You watch the first quarter. And this is just my personal opinion, and I've been talking about this, and I've had a couple agree with me, a couple disagree with me. This, in my opinion, was Patrick Mahomes' worst Super Bowl performance overall. I think this was the Chiefs' worst overall performance, too. But there was a window of opportunity that led the Kansas City Chiefs to come back and ultimately win this game. Let's go to the first quarter. You and I, we watched this game together. This was the first Super Bowl that I was able to watch play for play, snap for snap in just about 2 years. So I was very heavily invested. So at the end of the first quarter, it was scoreless. And then you looked over at me and you said, Patrick Mahomes looks lost right now.
Yep.
And that bled into the second quarter, where the 49ers defense was keeping him totally at bay. Rightfully so, the Kansas City Chiefs were doing the same thing to the 49ers, but they were still able to put up points. And then at about 3 minutes left in the second quarter, it happened. Dre Greenlaw goes to run onto the field, and he snaps his Achilles. And that's where it changed. They then had to move Fred Warner to Patrick Mahomes and bring in Dre Greenlaw's backup. And that was the window. That was the hole. His name defeats me, but he had 9 passes against him, 9 completions with a touchdown. The touchdown was actually the one in overtime that lost the game. Patrick Mahomes had 134.8 QB rating when throwing to him. And that sparked the overall injury sparked the comeback for the Chiefs. I told you at the end of the half when they kicked the field goal, this game is just getting started.
Yep.
And just like that, at the beginning of the third quarter to the end of the game, it was all Chiefs because there was that one little crack in the foundation of the 49ers defense that let the Chiefs back in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's an unfortunate injury, but it was a critical shot. You know, you said it kind of a lot this year, next man up. The next man up, unfortunately, could not fit in the shoes. And
Exactly. Yeah.
on the second most unfortunate fact is you had Patrick Mahomes able to exploit it. Now going into the overtime, do I think it was the smartest decision to take the ball? Absolutely not. I feel like that was a little bit of impulsive decision when it comes to coin tosses. You can kind of expect the Chiefs to take the ball the second time around when it comes to coin tosses, whether they take it at half, whether they choose to kick the ball off. They don't generally take the ball first.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that stays true to them is when they get the ball, you can almost guarantee they will score a touchdown. I think this year they had 17 straight games where they had an opening drive ending on a touchdown. And now you got to think going into overtime, this is a new game. This is a new game now. It's 0-0.
Yep.
They may not have opened the first game with a touchdown, what the first quarter went scoreless. You now got to think that they can come out and score a touchdown now. So if you don't score a touchdown, God help you. And unfortunately, that's just what happened. I don't think it was the smartest decision, but ultimately you got to stand by it. And hats off to Patrick Mahomes for being able to find the hole and just stay there all game against that 49ers defense.
Yeah, it was tough, man, and I gotta give a lot of credit to the Chiefs defense, especially Chris Jones, because he stepped up in a lot of big plays where it needed the most, especially like 3rd and 4 in overtime on in the red zone, just putting the pressure on Brock Purdy, who Brock Purdy didn't. I don't think he played bad. He didn't play spectacular, but he wasn't a difference maker in the game, and that's what the Super Bowl required. That demands of you. It was like you need to play your best, and I don't think that this was Brock Purdy's best, but he's still young. It's still learning. This is only his second year. But hats off to that Chiefs defense because they stepped up when it needed to the most. I think there was also just this whole game felt like the 49ers could have won this game. They absolutely could have won if they made the right decisions at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple decisions at the right time. And I feel like the game just got away from them because a 7-point lead at half just wasn't enough. And even though this is not the same Chiefs team like years past where it has an explosive offense, they're gonna march down the field. And that's exactly what they did. They just, a pass here, a pass there. In overtime, they looked unstoppable because that's when they opened up the playbook and they did all the crossing routes. It was pretty much only crossing routes up until the goal line, and then that final play was a stunt. And then they just stunted it, and it was a block, and it was just, there's nothing you could have done at that point. But
Right.
up until that point, there were a lot of decisions that I don't think reflect well on Kyle Shanahan because, for instance, now Christian McCaffrey, he touched the ball 30 times this game. He probably should have touched it more, which is weird to say, but it's like he was the only thing that really kept the 49ers alive on offense. He was that engine, and that's what you and I we were saying this whole year was Christian McCaffrey is the engine to the 49ers this year. I mean, he won Offensive Player of the Year. He probably should have won MVP of the year, but that's neither here nor there. He is one of the best players in the league, and I feel like he could have, if you leaned on him a little bit more, it could have helped. Like, for instance, when at the start of the third quarter, Patrick Mahomes threw an interception, and if you remember, the next 3 drives the 49ers had went scoreless, right? They didn't capitalize off that, right? The next 3 drives that they had, they gave it to Christian McCaffrey once in those 3 drives. You got away from yourself. He's been the linchpin of your offense, and you're going to abandon that now? You're going to do what the Ravens did and just completely abandon the running game? Please. That did not go well against the Chiefs when we forgot our identity. And it did not go well against the 49ers when you forgot your identity. George Kittle. Why didn't you target him?
Where'd he go?
He had one catch for 2 yards the whole game. The whole game. Why didn't you get him involved more in your offense? We've been saying this for since Kyle Shanahan has been a part of the 49ers. This is the most versatile offense in the NFL. And they looked completely one-dimensional. Their decision-making throughout the game cost them the game. And then overtime, I don't think there was anyone who suspected that the 49ers were going to come away and win that game in overtime. Once they got the ball, if you didn't score a touchdown,
that was
you were not. Kyle Shanahan was like, we wanted the ball third. Well, Mahomes was never going to give you the ball at that point.
Right, he wasn't going to give you another chance.
You're not going to get a chance, and that was it. And that was pretty much it for the game. But I do think that the 49ers, they still have a good chance to make it again next year. But again, the Chiefs are simply. This may have been the most impressive win by Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl and Andy Reid because of how we've been saying all year where it's like the Chiefs are vulnerable, man. The Chiefs are vulnerable. And despite them being vulnerable all year, they still won it. And they still had they won it against the 3 best teams in the AFC and the best team in the NFC. The Dolphins' #1 offense beat them. The Bills, who they've just been torturing them the whole year, beat them. Fucking the Ravens, so many accolades for the Ravens, spanked them. 49ers could have won that game, but didn't. And the Chiefs are now victorious because of it. Now, do I agree with you? Was this Patrick Mahomes' worst performance in the Super Bowl? I don't know. I'd have to really think about that. But as a team for the Chiefs, out of their 3 Super Bowl wins in the past 5 years, it's probably the most impressive win in the totality of the season, at least in my opinion.
I respect your opinion. I very much enjoyed this game a lot. But when it comes to Kyle's, the one thing I do disagree, I don't think we're going to see this 49ers team here again. And it's unfortunate.
Well, there's a chance. I didn't say that we will, but
no.
There's
a chance, but I feel like this was the year. Because you have everybody you need right now.
Mm-hmm.
Moving into the offseason, we're going to look at contracts and everything like that. Sooner or later, that offensive regime is not going to be what it is. They are simply not going to be able to keep everybody.
Yeah.
They're going to have to... So let's think about the offensive starters for a second, right? You have George Kittle, you have Christian McCaffrey, you have Brandon Ayuk, you have Deebo Samuel, you have Trent Williams, you have Brock Purdy. Those are your big focal point names on that offensive regime. All of them are going to want to be paid when their respective contracts are up.
Mm-hmm.
You are not going to be able to afford everybody simply because people are going to want massive deals, rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're going to have to think about which of these stars am I going to have to get rid of? And you're probably going to have to get rid of more than one.
It's going to be a tough decision too.
And especially with, Trent Williams is probably going to retire in the next year or two. He's not young. He's 37 years old, 38 years old. He can't expect him to be at his Hall of Fame level in the next couple of years, so he's going to be gone relatively soon. Christian McCaffrey, as good as he's been, you still can't really trust his injury and readiness to play a full season. He played a full season this year. I believe he played a full season this year.
He did, yeah.
So, but to
Except for the
expect
last
that,
game, he didn't start the last game, but that's still fine.
But he still suited up and played the full season. That's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't really expect that from him consistently, a full season. You can hope for it, and if it does get a full season in, he will be the best running back in the league. But that's still sketchy. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, they're both going to be wanting contracts when their respective contracts are up. And again, you're not going to be able to keep them both.
Yep.
You simply aren't going to be able to. So I feel like this may have been the one and only, the last chance for the Kyle Shanahan 49ers.
It's possible. There's still a chance. I still think, what was it? As of now, and again, we're not even a week removed from the Super Bowl. The odds favorites to win the Super Bowl next year are the 49ers, which is crazy to think about. That's according to Las Vegas.
So odd.
But to make a short story long and a long story short, there's a lot of time from now until next year's Super Bowl, and there's going to be a lot that happens from now until next year's Super Bowl.
Well, yeah.
So, but congratulations to the Chiefs. Believe me, right now, the three-peat is on the table. It's on the table.
Pretty dope. That would be cool to see, man. See a three-peat in our lifetime.
In NFL history, there has no team has ever won the Super Bowl 3 years back to back to back. It's never been done before. Teams have gotten close. There have been a lot of teams that have won it back to back, and the Chiefs are the first team in 19 years to do that. The last team to do that was the New England Patriots in 2003, 2004. So this was, we haven't seen this in nearly 20 years. But a three-peat's on the table, man. But we shall see, man. There's a lot that's going to happen from now until then. Any final thoughts on this game?
Again, I'll tell you, going into this game, I was still a little bitter that we were right about these being the finalists, but I'll tell you, I really was. I was still a little bitter watching these teams run out. I'm like, this is not America's game, but it's okay. But it was overall one of the most exciting throughout football games of the year, I think. It was very competitive. I have no quarrels as to the ending. I feel like the refs more so let the teams play. I don't think there was no sense of the game at any point where it was like, yep, that was a bullshit call. Like we joked around about it during, like, while we were watching a little bit, like, yeah, these bullshit penalties, blah, blah, blah. But it was like, there was no one particular instance where it was like, that is sheer game manipulation. This is nonsense. For that, the only thing that it's like a little questionable is this is now the third Super Bowl that the Chiefs have not had a holding penalty called on them. And there were a couple instances during that game where there weren't holding penalties called.
But there should have been.
When there should have been.
Yeah.
So that is a little questionable. But again, in the Super Bowl, they're going to let people play. They're going to let them play, and you're not going to see a lot of stupid holding penalties happen in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You weren't going to see it.
Yeah. The NFL refs are weird, man, because they don't consistently do it. But if you remember last year's Super Bowl with the Chiefs and the Eagles, there was that late call at the end that a lot of people were like, man, like, refs are bailing out the Chiefs and everything. And I think that Roger Goodell was like, we don't want that. We don't want teams to think that, obviously the script, but they don't want games to be decided on penalties. They want the games to be decided by players. And I think that that's not only what the NFL wants, but that as the fans, we want that too. We want games to be decided by the players, not the penalties. Because when there's too many penalties in a Super Bowl, it just does not make for a very entertaining experience. because then it's like, well, it's not even within the player's control at this point.
Right.
And so uh, there were a good amount of penalties on both teams, deservedly so. But I'm glad that there wasn't, when the biggest moments called for it, the flags did not decide the plays.
Right.
And for me, as a fan, I'm very happy for that.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that too.
Yeah, but oh man, this was a great game, man. Not a high scoring game either. A lot of people wanted high scoring too, but this
I was expecting high scoring, but once the first quarter went 0-0, I was like, all right, I was wrong, and I'll respectfully say that I was wrong, and I'm not mad that it was a low scoring game. I'm happy to see you see a lot of defensive Super Bowls wind up getting boring.
Yeah.
But this was by no means a boring defensive game.
No,
this still had the fireworks. It still had the electricity that we expected for a high-scoring game.
Yep.
It was just the defense brought the electricity with them.
Exactly. And Chris Palmer, we fucked up, right? We didn't watch this on Nickelodeon.
Dude, I've watching so many clips of what Nickelodeon did. They absolutely flamed so many stars by putting them in like really low quality fish animation.
Herring Styles. Billie Eilish.
The one they did for Oprah was disrespectful. They disrespected Oprah, and it was not fun.
Oprah Finfree.
Right, Oprah Finfree. She was deep purple with like Harry Potter glasses and curly hair, bro.
And like a so fucking librarian, fucking
right, the librarian beehive top. It was,
bro,
they disrespected her, and
I
we should have watched it on that. I'm telling you, we should have watched it on that.
We fucked up, man.
We fucked up, and I hope. But shout out to Nickelodeon Studios for really doing that to embrace the younger generations into watching football. They did a couple. They did a couple of things this year where they do like the NFL Slime Time, whether they do the Monday night game or the Thursday night game. I think Disney Plus actually did one too, where they did a game in Andy's room.
Oh yeah, that was one of the London games. That was actually the Jags Falcons game.
They did it in Andy's room.
Yep.
So
cool.
In those, I like that these production are reaching out to the younger generations to try and like grab them towards the sport of football, and I think it's really cool. I kind of wish we had that growing up.
I kind of wish so too, because for those of you who do not know, me at least, I didn't get into football until about like 2009, 2010, where I was obviously already born at that point, and I was already like past adolescence. But it was until you showed me a YouTube clip of like the hardest hitting fucking plays.
Yep, I'll never forget it.
And I was like, "Who's that guy?" You're like, "That's Ray Lewis." I'm like, "I like him."
What team does he play for? I go, the Ravens.
That's my team.
I go, wait, but look at this guy. It's Brian Urlacher. He plays for the Chicago Bears. And he was like, yeah, but what's your team? I was like, I'm a Steelers fan. He goes, who do they play? I go, they play the Ravens. I'm a Ravens fan.
Let's do it. And so,
and thus, but like, you were born.
Yes, and then here we are, all these years later. But I think if we did have that growing up, it would have definitely influenced how it would have influenced a lot of our generation to liking it more. And say what you will about Roger Goodell, again, he's one of those people. I don't think he's above criticism, and he deserves a lot of criticism, but I will commend him for trying to expand the game of football, not just internationally, which I mean he's done a very decent job at
as well.
Yeah. But yeah, he's also like reaching out to younger audiences, and so like embracing Nickelodeon, different platforms where all the kids are watching. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe in like a year or two that maybe there's one on Cartoon Network, a game or something like that, which would be, honestly, I would watch. I would actually watch that shit. But
I would watch it if it was on Boomerang, where it was like the cartoons from when we were kids doing it.
I doubt that, but it would
I
be
would
cool.
doubt it, but it would be very cool, like to see Tom and Jerry and all the cartoons that we grew up with.
Man, if Bugs Bunny was commentating on a fucking on an NFL game, I would lose my shit. But
I saw a clip of during the Super Bowl when Christian McCaffrey fumbled. When I tell you Patrick flamed him, he screamed, "You need to firmly grasp it." Dude, it was the greatest clip I've seen in a very long time.
Oh
We
my
really
god!
fucked up not watching that game.
I know, man. The memes just out of that alone, fucking hilarious, and I love it.
It's gold. And I hope moving forward that there are more games like broadcasted to children in like a more entertaining, fun way.
Yeah.
Because I will tune in and watch them. Because if they're gonna keep it like that, like low quality roast sessions, that's awesome to me.
Well, it's too because consider it like this too. There are obviously you and I, we do not have kids, right?
Right.
Full disclosure, but there are parents out there that would watch this with their kid, right? And so
Right.
that way your kid's entertained while on
You're
because
still
of the
getting
network,
to watch
right?
the game.
And yet you're still watching the game, and it makes for a very good bonding experience for your kid. And
Right.
again, I don't know if that is something that you like, the viewer that has done that and you have watched it. Please let us know what it's like to just watch a game with your kid and the experience that is, because I'm sure that's a very enriching experience to just kind of bond over what you're watching on TV. And that's one thing that you and I, we love about football, is that it brings people together. And
Well, that's the entirety of the. I'm sorry to cut you off. That's the entire idea of like actually putting sports on TV is you bring it's connection. We as people need connection, and we need things to bring us together. So people love being in large groups. It's just what it is. We're communal beings.
Yeah.
Some people are more comfortable with it than others, but ultimately, when you go to bigger venues and bigger public venues, it brings a lot out of people. Like you and me, we go to metal concerts and we see some of the most amazing things happen at metal shows. Or you go to a sporting event, you see people that wouldn't necessarily be in the same public group together not giving a shit. It's where you bring unity through sports and entertainment is really what drives human nature to be more communal.
Well said. Absolutely. And I 100% agree with that. And here we are, man. At the end of a football year, where all our gatherings to watch Sunday games are over, at least until September. It's a sad time, but it's not sad because there's still plenty of other sports, and we hope that whatever you watch and whatever you just make sure you watch it with the people you love, and that makes for an enriching experience.
Oh yeah,
that's what it's all about.
Well said.
So, man, what a year this was! What an absolute year this was. We do like to do a year in review episode. We're going to combine this episode as a year in review. Mostly, I just wanted to ask Chris Palma just 3 questions.
Go ahead.
Let's start with the first question. What do you think was the best game this year?
Honestly, rolling off the top of my head, terrible call included, I think the best game of the year was that Detroit Lions Dallas Cowboys game.
That's a good one.
That game was so much fun to watch, with that call included at the end. Even with that included, the controversy behind it, leading up to that call, that game, it was such such an entertaining game. That was the first game that came to mind when you asked me that.
No, it's good. Hey, I'm glad, man. Like, because there was so much that happened this year, right? So many games, and we talked about it all, right? Like, we talked about so many games, but that game was a memorable game, for better or for worse. It was a very memorable game, and I mean, these teams will play again next year. Possibly in Detroit,
Can't
but
wait.
We'll see, because both of them won their respective divisions, so they will play each other next year. So we will get this rematch, and I'm excited for that.
What was
for
yours?
me, First one that comes to mind, probably Buffalo and Philadelphia. Like that was because that
Okay.
at that point in time, that was the Eagles just after they won against the Chiefs, right? In
Hmm.
Arrowhead. And this was before they went 1-6 the rest of the year. That was probably the apex of their endeavors. But it was basically Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts just going back to back to back to back, and just no one, no quarter let up throughout. And it was just an absolute slugfest between these two teams until Philly pulled it out in the end, where Jalen Hurts ran it and everything. And it was just a wild, wild game
Yeah. No,
to
that one was
see.
a roller coaster for sure.
So to me, that's the first one that came to mind was
Hey.
uh, Buffalo and Philly, man, because both teams were just playing their best football at like against each other. And what more could you ask for a team where it's just like two teams like trying to gain momentum and just trying to play the best football to beat each other? It's just great entertainment. So that's to me the best game of the year.
Hey, that was
Uh,
a very good one. That's a roller coaster of a game. Again, two Titans, and hope very good things for them. But again, it's hard to see when it comes to those two teams.
Close second, Chargers Detroit,
Another great
where it
game.
was absolutely high scoring, and Detroit wins it with the last second field goal. That was really good too. Um, but to me, there's more memorable moments out of the Philly Buffalo one. But
Okay.
that both were really good. So
Mhm.
Chris Palmer, let me ask you this: what was your worst game this year, in your opinion? I got two that comes to mind.
You see, that's a hard question because even with there were some blowouts this year. There wasn't necessarily a bad game is so
Subjective. It's very subjective. Yeah.
right. That's what makes this a very loaded question. So I guess my worst game, because it comes with a silver lining. It's when the Miami Dolphins thrashed the Broncos. When they put
Okay.
70 on the
70.
Broncos.
Yeah.
Right. That may have been. I guess that would have to be the quote unquote worst game of the year because of the score differential. But in that came the rebirthing of Russell Wilson. So I would say that was the worst game, but it had one of the most substantial outcomes of the season.
Hmm.
Where right after that game, the Broncos turned it on and they shook the entire AFC. And so I guess that would be my worst game, but it had one of the most controversial outcomes.
Okay. Hey, I respect it, man. That's a really good way to look at it. Um, I guess for myself, I'd go Vegas, Minnesota. 3-0.
Yeah, that was ugly. That was an ugly one.
That that one, because there's a difference between a defensive game and just the offenses just shitting the bed.
Not there. Right.
And that's the thing. Like the offenses were just shitting the bed. This is when Nick Mullins was starting for the Vikings after Josh Dobbs lost their trust. Um,
2 games in.
yeah, it was just like 2 games in, and that ironically too, my runner up for that was also Vikings Bears the second time around in Minnesota, where it was just nothing but field goals and Josh Dobbs couldn't get anything going. So,
Right.
but sticking with the Raiders Vikings one, it was just one of those games where it was like you're just praying something happens, something, and for the longest time, nothing happened in that game. And I felt bad for fans that went there because
That was an ugly game.
you're probably better off watching a baseball game at that point. It's,
Right.
but
You've seen better baseball games, more high
yeah,
tempo baseball games.
yeah, and it's just it was just probably a very boring game to watch for most people. Uh,
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, it's like there was nothing to come of that game either. Like neither of those teams took that one as like a learning experience to come out of the gate after that week because they were both, the Vikings were kind of stagnant after the Kirk Cousins injury, and the Raiders were doing interim coaching, and then Antonio Pierce became interim coach, and and then they kind of gravitated towards him. But it was no real like upcoming from that game.
Well, I will disagree with you on this. I think that the week after this game, the Raiders played the Chargers on Thursday night, and it was an absolute smacking, 63-21. The silver lining that came out after that game, after this game, the 3-0 game, was that 63-21 game against the Chargers. I think that really brought the Raiders to believe in Antonio Pierce, where it's like, oh man, they could have easily just like had another dud of a game. He said, nope, we are not doing that. We are not doing that. We are going to put up points on the board,
And a lot of them.
and they set a franchise record in points the following week, in a short week too, because that was on a Thursday night. So I think for me, I think the silver lining was that it got the players to buy into Antonio Pierce. And now Antonio Pierce, he's now the Raiders' new head coach heading into 2024. So I think that was probably the turning point for them.
That's fair. Opinion. That's valid. That's valid.
So, oh man. Whew. But please, guys, if you're watching this, please let us know what you thought. Like your best games, worst games that you thought this year. Please, we want to hear it all. Please comment down below. We want to know. But I got one more question for you, Chris Palma. And I guess it's a two-part question. What was your biggest surprise this year? It could be either surprise team, player, and also surprise game, an outcome that you did not expect.
Well, I think when it comes to surprise team, I think everyone is pretty much on the same page with Houston. Houston is totally ahead of schedule. They kind of forgot that there's a development part when it comes to this league, and they just came out ready. But I hope that doesn't become a detriment in the end. With how good they were, that sets the bar extremely high.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be a high-profile target all year next year. What's going on with them? How's everything doing? And if they do any less than what they did this year, it's going to be a problem in the media. And that's just what it is. And that's just how it goes because of how good they did with a rookie coach with D'Amico Ryan, a rookie quarterback, a whole slew of rookies on the offense, and a whole rookie defense. That team was extremely raw. And they superseded everything that was expected of them. They were going in with the expectations of winning 2 games this year. So, and they came in and they made it to the playoffs.
And beat a very viable playoff team, in the Browns.
And won a playoff game, round 1.
Yep.
They totally forgot that they were supposed to develop. But I really hope that this becomes a molded machine versus a team that grows so fast they can't catch it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. To me, that's my biggest surprise team as well. For those exact reasons.
And for surprise player, I'm gonna be a little biased here. Is Jaylen Warren. He surprised the hell out of me to have over 1,000 scrimmage yards as a number 2 running back. Dude is an absolute workhorse. He knows everything about giving a second effort. He's really shows a lot of promise. So he was a very surprising, outbreaking player for me this year.
I can't argue with that, man. That he was an absolute stud for the Steelers, man. And man, him and Najee, they just complement each other extremely well in that offense. For me, a surprise player, I'm going Puka Nacua, man. I don't think anyone saw it.
He was great too, man.
I don't think anyone saw this out of a 5th round draft pick. Just I mean, but he just became an
He tore it
absolute
up.
stud for the Rams. And I think that there's something to be said again where you're drafted. And I
Hmm.
think that he under Sean McVay with Matt Stafford,
Matt
you're
Stafford.
you're in the right system. You're in the perfect system to flourish and develop. And especially with Cooper Kupp missing the first couple weeks due to injury, he
You had
was
some
that
big
number
shoes to fill.
and he filled them perfectly.
One
Uh,
hundred
so
percent.
so to me, he was that surprise player, man, and I give a shout out to him. I look forward to seeing him in the his career going forward, as well as the Texans too.
Hmm.
Like with C.J. Stroud winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, Will Anderson winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. So it's there's been a lot of good young players to come out this year. Um, but Chris Palmer, give me your surprise game. What game were you surprised about this year?
I don't know. It really wasn't a game that surprised me that much. Like the outcome, not much. You know, there was a couple of games that didn't go the way I wanted them to, but it was nothing like, oh shit, did not see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's that's a hard question for me. I don't know. I don't really have a surprise. Like what game surprised me?
I got a surprise game for
Go
you.
ahead, and maybe it'll help me pick one.
Broncos Bills. It was in Buffalo. If you remember, this was like the midway point of the season. After the Broncos got thrashed by, this was a couple weeks after the Broncos got thrashed
Yeah,
by.
this was the awakening of Russell Wilson.
This was when the Broncos were actually on a roll and actually caught people's eyes. It was like, oh wow, they're doing this. And then I think the following week that they beat Kansas City, and it was like, oh wow, the Broncos are found their groove. But this was the game that did it because I think going into it, both you and I, we picked the Bills to win this game. And we were like, yeah, it's against the Broncos. It's easy. No, the Broncos kept it close. They kept it very, very, very close. And they did what they wanted to do. They did a lot of control, a lot of run, a lot of good defensive stops. And it was like, it kind of put them on the map for those 5 weeks that they were 5 to 7 weeks that they were really good. Where it was like, wow, they're playing their type of
Extremely well.
football
Right.
extremely well. And to me, that was the game where it surprised it because they also won it on a last second field goal because they missed the field goal initially, but then there were 12 men on the field, Damar Hamlin on the
Right.
field,
Right.
and then the Broncos got the kick. And it was just like, wow, the Broncos actually beat the Bills. It was really, to me, that was the biggest surprise game of the year.
Yeah. That's I respect that, and I'll go with that one. I don't really have one. I didn't think that there was really many games this year where it was like, wow, didn't really see that one coming, except for on the Broncos end. Once that ass kicking happened, and the Broncos woke up, was when all the heads turned, and all heads turned to Denver. And um, I guess another one would probably be the game where Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions in a game. Um, I don't think anyone really saw him doing that because of how efficient he is at what he does.
Yeah.
Um,
Who's that
so I guess
against?
I don't remember. I was against Baltimore. So I I guess that could be taken as a surprise, even though you guys had the number one overall offense. But see, again, as surprising as that situation could be, it wasn't like an oh fuck moment because they're playing the Ravens defense and that's what they do. They're great at turning the ball over.
Yeah, but everyone expected the Niners to win that because they were the cream of the crop at that
Right,
point in
they're the
time.
top of the. Again, I understand it would be. I guess that would be a surprising game, but again, to me, it wasn't like a oh shit. I don't think anyone expected that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If someone told me that the Ravens caused a 2-year sophomore to throw 4 interceptions, it doesn't surprise me that much, regardless of it being Brock Purdy on the 49ers. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that wouldn't surprise me as much as it would surprise another guy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me.
Yeah, I totally respect it, my brother. I totally respect it. Oh man. Any final thoughts you got on this year?
Um, yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying with Puka Nakua and just give another final shout out to Matt Stafford. He does not get the recognition a lot for how good of a career he has and how good of a quarterback he's always been. He spent a lot of time in Detroit. A lot of people say he burned a lot of years in his career in Detroit with injury, not getting anywhere. But Halpin, who was the receiver that he had in Detroit?
Oh, Megatron, baby.
Ah, right. And then what happened with Cooper Kupp the year that he went to the Rams?
Well, Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown that year.
Right. And what happened with Puka Nacua this year?
Oh, he actually had the rookie receiving yards record.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the constant there?
Man, I don't know, man. Maybe they all ate McDonald's or something like that pre-games or something
Nope,
like that.
it ain't
I
that.
don't know.
They have one of the most undersold and underrated quarterbacks of all time thrown to them. And that's, to me, that is the truest fact. Matt Stafford has been undersold his entire career, and he just makes great receivers elite.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's a kingmaker, man. That's
he
really.
He makes great things happen when it comes to skill guys. He is one of the best. He's one of the best quarterbacks who probably would have went down without a ring if he had stayed in Detroit.
Yeah, and I'm glad that his ring validates his greatness, because even prior to that ring, you and I have been saying for years, like,
We've
he's a
seen
Hall of
his
Fame
greatness.
quarterback.
Right.
He's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and for years we've been saying this. But because he was in Detroit, no one recognized him. Now he's in LA, and he's not only won his ring, but it's like he's changed life in LA. Like, he's made the Rams. It's like, wow, like this is the prestigious LA Rams.
Right.
That's because of him. That's
all him.
And it's like, because with Jared Goff, and no disrespect to Jared Goff, man, because he's a great quarterback too, but it's like Matt Stafford's just he's that next level. He's that
right. He's the ace.
He's that ace. It's like, it's crazy to think that he has as many rings as Roger has, and rings and Super Bowl appearances Rodgers has, and he's just been doing it with lesser teams than Rodgers has.
And he's had to go through much more turmoil in the interim.
Adversity. He's had to overcome a lot more adversity.
He's had a rough career.
So no,
hats off.
Absolutely. Hats off to Matt Stafford, man. That's a good shout out. And remember, last year he was injured for most of the year.
Spinal injury at the end of the year.
Yeah, so he was not seeing the field most of the year. That's why Baker Mayfield came there and give it. Hey, I also just thinking of it. Shout out to Baker Mayfield, man.
Honorable mention: Baker Mayfield played his best football.
Yeah, man. This is a very impressive year for Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. I hope the Bucs give Baker Mayfield a contract extension, because I think that he definitely deserves it this year. Even if it's nothing crazy, maybe like a 2-3 year extension, man, because that would be great to see. But I know obviously this offseason is going to bring about a lot of change for a lot of different teams too. So the teams that we see now are not going to be the same teams, next year.
The big thing I hope changes next year is I hope the stigma of a system quarterback leaves. I really do. I feel like people have really gotten away from the idea of your quarterback needs to fit the system to be able to succeed, and everyone just wants a playmaker.
Mm-hmm.
I hope moving forward they understand that you need a system quarterback just to win games. Fuck the playmaker part. You need someone who can fit your system and fit it correctly to win you games. If you see it done wrong, look at Jared Goff on the Rams. He was a good player. He didn't fit the system.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Detroit. He fits that system. They went to the NFC Championship.
Yep.
Matt Stafford, great player. He didn't fit the system in Detroit, but he's a loyalist. He goes to the Rams. He wins a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
He fit the system. Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was a nomad. He was the next Ryan Fitzpatrick because of how many teams he was going to. And then he found Tampa.
It was...
He would
last
need a little
year
bit.
Was rough. Last year was very rough because he started the year for the Panthers.
Right.
and then wound up on the Rams. But he did find a home now in Tampa. So
He found a system that he fits in, a
he
system and a
probably saved
culture.
his career. Yeah, he probably saved
Right.
his career.
By going to Tampa.
Yep.
100%, I'll agree with that. And he found a culture and he found a system that fits the best with him. And he played his best football by the time he got there.
Hmm.
So that's my biggest hope for change next year. Is I hope the stigma behind and it's a senseless stigma too. I don't understand it as to why it's there now
Hmm.
behind a system quarterback. A quarterback that fits the system will win you games, and that's what you need to get to the next stage. Just to win games. Fuck a playmaker. Get me someone who can win me games.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something to be said about that too, because it's like, hey, look, if you could find a guy that knows what your offense is trying to implement and do it to the best of their efficiency, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing
And
wrong
there's
with
not
that.
many teams that'll be able to beat it.
Yeah, because it's like the philosophy that your coach has is a formula that has been passed down through the history of the NFL. And it's like if you do this and do it right, and obviously there's so many variables that go into it, but it's like we're going to teach you on it. But if you are receptive to learning the system, then you're going to be receptive to winning.
Correct. And it's a senseless stigma to me. And it was the senseless stigma that really overshadowed Brock Purdy this year, that really made it seem like the fans of the sport were moving away from the fundamental idea of what this game is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants a walking highlight reel to run their team.
Yeah.
And again, it's the reality that that's an anomaly. You
Mm-hmm.
don't find those in the draft. And if you go looking for them, you're going to look for years.
Yep.
Until you find one, and then by then your entire team is going to be old, broken, and they're not going to be able to do anything with the people you have. So your best bet is to find a core group of guys that know how to do their job down to the fundamental basics and progress together. That's
Mm-hmm.
the best way to formulate a team and a franchise. And you see it in Green Bay, you see it in Houston, you see it in Detroit. Those are the formulas that are getting teams to escalate quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, and it's well said, brother. It's absolutely well said. I
Thank you.
love it.
Thank you.
Oh shit, man. Hey, man, there's so much to talk about, man, and we're only an hour in, and there's just so much to talk about. Um, I kind of wanted to talk about coaches, but I'm like, maybe we could save that another time.
We can say
I'll
that.
just briefly just say, before we head into the off season, there are 8 teams with new head coaches. The Chargers, Jim Harbaugh. The Seahawks with Mike McDonald. The Panthers with Dave Canals. Falcons with Raheem Morris. Raiders with Antonio Pierce. Titans with Brian Callahan. The Patriots with Gerard Mayo. And the Commanders with Dan Quinn. So a lot of these teams, a quarter of the league is going to be under new regimes this upcoming season. And so that's going to dictate what the offseason is like. I know for the offseason next month, this is the end. This is going to be our last weekly episode. But we will come back to you in March for free agency because there's a lot to talk about for free agency. A lot of big moves that happened last year, the year prior, and expected to this year as well. There's a lot of good players that are going to be on the market. Derrick Henry, Russell Wilson,
A
Mike
lot of running
Evans,
backs on the block this year.
a lot of Saquon Barkley, a lot of running backs.
T.
Gus
Higgins and
Edwards,
Tyler
T.
Boyd.
Higgins. Yeah. So there's a lot of
A
players
lot
to
of
keep an eye
names.
out for free agency, and we're going to get back to you in March to talk about that too. In April is the NFL draft, and there's a lot
Can't
to
wait.
talk about in the draft. I know Palma, he's already
Can't
itching
wait.
to talk about that. He can't wait. But
I can't wait for the draft, and I want you to know, and you know this. I know it doesn't really start around this time for you. For me, the season starts around the combine. The combine starts the season for me. That's when shit gets real. When you start seeing the private workouts and you start seeing people do what, like, you start showing their skills, that's when the season starts for me.
Yeah, and that's in April too. So Palma and I will get back to uh we'll make a pre-draft episode, maybe present a little mock draft and everything, and then we'll have a post-draft analysis on all the teams and all the moves that they've made to acquire different players and stuff. Aside from that, if anyone wants to do an interview, even in the off season, please let us know. I would be down to do one. I know, Chris, would you be
100%.
down to do it? Perfect,
For
yeah.
sure.
And if there's anything else you guys want to discuss in the off season, please let us know, man. I know for me personally, I would like to get more interviews with people, man, because we did 3 interviews this year and they were phenomenal episodes. And I want to give a shout out to Shah, to Travis, and to Gunther, man. Thank you so much for being on the podcast this year. It was very special to have you guys on and actually have those episodes broadcasted with you guys. We hope to get you guys back on next year too. And I want more. I want more interviews, man. If you're watching this, you better start thinking about when you're coming on this pod, man, because I want to have you on this pod. So
Yeah, no, for sure. I have a couple of people who I'm in talks with to come on for next season.
I want Mr. Crowley on the pod.
In time. When he doesn't want to jump off my shoulder, okay? He'll come on. But thank you to everyone who spent another season with us watching this podcast. Thank you to Gunther, thank you to Shalik, and thank you to Travis for coming on. Gunther, I'm sorry I wasn't here for our interview, but next year, if you would come on, I would love to be here for another interview with you. I have a couple people at my job who said they were willing to come on. But to anyone listening who, like you said, who wants to come on and have a conversation about your team, what you want them to do during the off season, who you would like to see them draft, this, that, the third, and even after the draft, how you feel that went, anything you want to talk about, please just contact myself or John. This has been a fun year, man. Year number 3 in the books.
I know, man. And I just want to say again, thank you to everyone who watches. It makes it really special that we do this for fun. We don't do this for fame or anything like that, for money or anything. We do this for fun because we love the sport of football, and we love the company that it brings. And Palma, my brother, thank you so much for another wonderful year, man.
Hey, man.
Fucking year 3 in the books. I can't believe it, man. I can't believe it. But this is so much to talk. Every episode could be a fucking 5-hour episode.
Hey, one day we'll just let it rip. And everyone, stay tuned. Stay tuned for next year. We have a couple of tricks up our sleeve that we're gonna try and bring your entertainment to the next level. Whether it be going live, whether it be having a little bit of music in our intro, we'll see. We have a couple of things up our sleeve.
Yeah, we gotta tinker around with it a bit, but we gotta work in the lab.
Right, we're going to the lab. We're gonna try and make out your experience better, each and every year, like we always do. But again, thank you guys again for your consistent support and always watching us. Yeah,
it means the world to us that inviting us into your life. So, but let's not drag out the outro too much, man. Thank you, everyone. We love you all, and we hope that you'll join us next year on Let's Talk Football.
Yep. Thanks, guys.